Okay. Part 8. The epilogue and the 2 side stories. I think there was 2 side stories, but whatever. It was either 2 or 3. Anyway, the epilogue. A lone high beast flew toward Kernberger. The sky had been bright blue when it departed from Ehrenfest, but now there were dark clouds amassing overhead. Alexis glanced up at the charging heavens, then grabbed a rejuvenation potion from his hip and gulped it down. He wanted to reach Kernberger before the rain began to fall. So he channeled Mormon into the reins he was holding and made his high beast accelerate. I wonder, what will Father say when he's heard my piece? Alexis was both a guard knight serving Wilfried and the son of Geeb Kernberger's second wife. Tonight he had an order from his lord to find out what the Geeb thought about Rosemine after their spring prayer meeting, and to secure his cooperation if possible. Geeb Kernberger had openly declared that he wouldn't support an Archduke candidate simply because his son was in their service, and Alexis was certain that nothing he could say would change that. The most he could do was pray that Rosemine had made a poor impression. Such news would do wonders to cheer up his lord, who had been in a sour mood for quite some time. But he knew that such a wish was craven and despairing. Alexis had never thought he would one day return home with such a heavy heart. He wanted to delay his arrival at Kernberger, even if only a little, but the sky continued to fill with dark clouds. The only choice he had was to accelerate. Ah, Lord Alexis, we are glad you made it before the rain got any worse. Alexis had arrived while the rain was still only a light shower, and was immediately welcomed by knights in service to Geeb Kernberger. These same knights had served as his instructors before he came to work under Wilfried, so he knew them all well. He accepted the towel they held out to him and started drying his red-orange hair. So you finally come of age, Alexis, one of the knights said. How quickly time travels. Are you here on a mission? Yep. I wouldn't have been able to leave the noble's quarter without an order from my lord. Underage retainers were normally forbidden from leaving the noble's quarter, even when ordered to. The rule had been slightly more relaxed as of late, but only to accommodate the underage Archduke candidates involved with the printing industry and religious ceremonies. Alexis was now a new adult, having graduated only at the end of last winter, and this was his first time returning to Kernberger after the end of spring prayer. Being welcomed home by so many familiar faces made him feel proud that he was finally old enough to complete missions on his own. Before he knew it, the burden of his duty felt a little bit more manageable. Lord Alexis, how is Judith doing? She accompanied Lady Rosemine on her recent visit, but spoke almost entirely about her lady. As I recall, she barely said a word about herself. The inquiry had come from a veteran knight who had given Alexis a special training session when he was first chosen to be a guard knight. Alexis knew him well, but not his daughter, Judith, since she hadn't been able to visit the Geeb's estate before her baptism. Despite them both being from Kernberger, Alexis had seen Judith for the first time in the castle's playroom. They now shared a professor working as the guard knights of Archduke candidates, but their interactions were still few and far between. On top of being different ages and genders, they served different individuals. I'm just glad she's an apprentice knight. Had she been born an apprentice attendant or scholar, they wouldn't have had any opportunities to meet, and Alexis wouldn't have had anything to say in response to the veteran knight. In the current situation, he could at least see her at the training grounds of the Knight's Order. Judith was also famous for her tremendous accuracy, a skill that she had brought her the attention of Bonifacius, who spoke about her on occasion. Lord Wilfrid is usually in the castle, and Lady Rosemine in the temple, so their retainers seldom have a chance to interact, Alexis explained. I only see Judith at the training grounds, but she is an excellent knight in the making. She even receives frequent praise from Lord Bonifacius. I greatly admire her accuracy and focus. I see, the veteran knight replied, pleased to hear that his daughter was doing well. To think that Lord Bonifacius is praising her. Alexis was immediately reminded of the days when the veteran knight had declared that his son would follow in his footsteps and grow up to become a knight to serve in service of the Geeb. The boy in question was Theodore, who was currently in an unusual situation wherein he served Rosemine only at the Royal Academy. Alexis smiled to himself, glad to see that the family was as close as ever, then asked after Geeb Kernberger. Is my father in his office? I did send word before leaving Ehrenfest, but... He is. Allow us to take you there. No need, you can get back to training. Alexis hadn't found many opportunities to return home as of late, but he had grown up in the estate. He didn't need to be led to his father's office. Still, the attendant and the other knights said that the Geeb would scold them if a guest were allowed to wander around without a guide. So he had no choice but to follow them. Excuse me, Geeb Kernberger, they said. Geeb Kernberger often flew around the province on patrol, so his office was usually swarming with visitors whenever he was in the estate. This time, however, perhaps because Alexis had sent word that he was coming, the office was completely empty except for an attendant serving tea, the Geeb himself, and a scholar standing behind him. Come in, Geeb Kernberger said. Alexis had expected his father to be busy with work as usual, but this meeting seemed nothing like their ones before. Geeb Kernberger was acting not as a father welcoming his son home, but as a Geeb hosting an archducal retainer who had arrived on official business. The realization that he was being treated first and foremost as a guard knight made Alexis feel the weight of his duty even more keenly than before. He stood up straight as if attempting to shoulder it better. Geeb Kernberger, Alexis said, Lord Wolfrid has ordered me here to gather intelligence on Lady Rosamund's visit during spring prayer. In response to his son's formal declaration, Geeb Kernberger raised an eyebrow, then gave a curt nod and offered the boy a seat. It seemed that Alexis' attitude had received a passing mark. I see, the Geeb replied with a scrutinizing look, and what intelligence does your lord seek exactly? Was there some kind of problem with Lady Rosamund's spring prayer report? Alexis stiffened. This was his first time facing Geeb Kernberger, not his father. Engaging in serious conversation with nobles in the castle had always been the work of scholars in attendance, and those he had interacted with at the Royal Academy had all been underage. In other words, he had very little experience with direct confrontations or needing to weigh up his conversation partner while they did the same with him. He could only swallow nervously under the sharp, experienced eyes of a seasoned noble. There was no problem with her report on spring prayer, Alexa said. Lord Wolfrid simply wishes for more information. I understand that several of his retainers were relieved of duty over the winter. Is this really an urgent enough matter to warrant sending a guard knight who has recently come of age away from the nobles' quarter? Probably not. Venturing off to gather intelligence was the duty of scholars. Of course, a knight who happened to notice something important while on an expedition would report as much to their lord or lady, but it was rare for them to be explicitly tasked with collecting information. Geeb Kernberger understood all this as well, which is why he had assumed that the circumstances were serious. Alexis gave a careful nod. The impact of the purge has been significant. The archducal family cannot remain as it once was. I received a report that the relationship between the archduke candidates has changed, but did not detect any signs of that from Lady Rosamund during spring prayer. She spoke in support of Lord Wolfrid becoming the next Ob and made it clear that she does not seek the position herself. Alexis felt a wave of relief wash away all of the tension in his body. His lord had been making all kinds of accusatory remarks. The Lionsgangs aren't the only ones pushing for Rosamund to become the next Ob. She's vying for the position herself, he had said. She got father to adopt her purely so that she could take his place. That's so stupid! All she wants is to read books. Do you really think she would have time to do her duties as an archduchess if she was to do that? Really? No! All she wants to do is read. If she can do that and not be the archduke, or archduchess, whatever, then she would love to do that. Things had gotten so bad that only Rosamund's retainers and Lampert were trying to refute his claims. The purge had completely shifted the balance of power, such that barely any nobles of the Veronica faction remained in the castle. Now it was dominated by neutral parties and those of the Lionsgang faction, meaning that Wilfrid was isolated and unpopular despite his supposed position as the next Ob. Perhaps this news from Geeb Kernberger would ease his concerns to some degree. As a Geeb, how did Lady Rosamund seem to you? Alexis asked, then shyly added, as an archduke candidate, that is. Lady Rosamund, The Geeb replied, stroking his chin with a smile. She was even better suited to becoming the Ob than I had expected. She has all the innate qualities necessary for the role. She did not cower when meeting me for the first time, and she clearly stated her thoughts. She also considered the opinions of others without allowing them to sway her. I would expect nothing less from Lord Boniface's granddaughter. She would make for a talented archduchess who would take good advantage of her faction without needing to worry about becoming its puppet. Alexis took in a sharp breath. The Geeb had seen through him and realized that his son was secretly on edge about facing his father in this formal setting. Furthermore, the Geeb continued, as far as the reports on her actions in the Royal Academy and the development of the printing industry indicate, Lady Rosamund is driven by the desire to create a more comfortable future. She wants to raise all the students' grades, ensure that nobles have more mana at their disposal, change society's views on the temple and religious ceremonies, improve the position of commoners, and she wants more books. Someone with such clear goals will find it easier to secure people who are willing to work for them. As a faraway Geeb, I can trust that she won't simply allow her retainers to take control. That was higher praise than Alexis had expected. Geeb Kernberger had only met Rosamund once, though. She may have been an ideal archduke candidate on the outside, but a closer look would surely reveal some faults. Perhaps the Geeb's opinion would turn on its head once he knew more of the truth? I agree that Lady Rosamund's grades and ideals are splendid, but she is far too much of a dissident, Alexis said. Her actions and requests are sudden and incomprehensible to the point that she troubles all those around her. Were she to become the next Ob Ehrenfest, none of us would be able to keep up with her. This did nothing to faze Geeb Kernberger. Instead, he scoffed. It is the duty of retainers and spouses to grip the reins of such people, to soften the blows such that their desires can be realized. That is why the archducal family takes the best of the best as retainers, is it not? In fact, we can already see for ourselves that Lady Rosamund is doing well. Her successful relationship with those in her service are why the entire duchy's grades have risen, not just her own. And why she has managed to connect with top-ranking duchies and the royal family. You will note that the retainers in question are not at all disapproving of their lady. My own Judith and Theodore are proud to be serving her. If you mean to tell me that Lord Wolfrid takes issue with this, he must be jealous and nothing more. Ooh! Oh! What is Wolfrid gonna say if he hears this? Oh! Alexis shook his head, his bright blue eyes fixed on the game. Some of her retainers and some of the Lies gangs have taken issue as well. Lord Traugott resigned after saying he could not keep up with her at all. That is a lie. He resigned because she told him to. Because, essentially, the only reason he was in her service is because he wanted her mana compression method, and then he was going to drop her like a hot potato. Or a hot potato full, I should say. Because she was so sickly. That was the only reason he was in her service. And when she finally realized this, and he insulted Daniel, she dropped him like a hot potato full. It was not because he couldn't keep up with her. It's because he didn't like her. And this was coming from a recommendation from Riarda. Riarda vouched for Traugott, saying that he would be good for her. So this was not because he couldn't keep up with her. And the Lies gang supporting her are pushing for the Ehrenfest students to lower their grades at the Royal Academy. It is hard to imagine her being a successful OB. You would use Traugott as an example? Thank you. As I recall, Lord Bonifacius was enraged at his grandson and fully blamed him for the incident. I was also informed via reports that the Lies gangs would support higher grades under Lady Rosamund's rule. Now, whose words were those? Not yours, I expect. Alexis faltered. His father was situated in Kernberger, a backwater province, yet he seemed to know quite a bit about Ehrenfest's current state of affairs. Minor nitpicks would do nothing to sway him. Ha. After a moment spent in silence, Alexis gave a bitter nod, though he found his father's tenacity to be somewhat assuring. They were the words of my lord's former head attendant Oswald. He would describe Lord Wolfrid as a far superior archduke candidate, one who does not trouble others with unconventional demands. Moronic, the Gives said. They may be convenient for retainers, but it will do nothing to benefit the duchy. Ha. To his own surprise, Alexis was overcome with the feeling that he had just confirmed an important suspicion. There was a massive gap between what his fellow retainers and everybody else understood as common sense. Their position was heavily biased in favor of the Forum Veronica faction, and the current political climate that had only made them more obstinate. It was constricting and at times suffocating. An OB needs the will to decide upon and advance toward a goal, and the resolve to make hard decisions and accept responsibility for the consequences, Guy Kernberger declared. As an honor student, Lord Wolfrid would make for a safe archduke, but someone who is a slave to his retainers' opinions would never be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with top-ranking duchies or execute revolutionary ideas. In that sense, I consider Lady Rosamund better suited to becoming an archduchess than a first wife. Alexis sighed. Then I suppose I cannot give Lord Wolfrid the answer he seeks. Father, if my lord holds me responsible for your assessment, will you welcome me home to Kernberger? I can't say I follow. You would be held responsible for my opinions? I would assume so. Lampret was rebuked after meetings with the Lies gang faction and did poorly. Wolfrid had resolved to use spring prayer to get the nobles of the Lies gang faction on his side. He had assumed that his engagement to Rosamund would make them more likely to accept him, citing the fact that during his trips to the printing industry and such, he had actually been respected as the next OB. Rosamund's retainers and Lampret had attempted to advise Wolfrid against the idea, stressing that it would end in failure, but he had chosen to go through with it anyway. He had sincerely believed that he could get through to the Lies gangs once they were standing face to face. Alexis hadn't been among those trying to stop his lord. He had appreciated the enthusiasm, if anything. He would simply focus on his duty as a guard knight, or as a guard. Besides, Wolfrid couldn't expect things to go well right off the bat. Or so he had thought. The Gives among the Lies gang faction had all given Wolfrid cold stares and rejected him so harshly that he had come away distraught. Their support was for Rosamund alone, and they had made it perfectly clear that even with his engagement, they would eliminate Wolfrid without a second thought if doing so would make their preferred candidate the next OB. In his anger, Wolfrid had been quick to pass the buck. This plan failed because Lampret didn't lay the proper groundwork. Rosamund's to blame as well. She's always so uncooperative, even though she's my fiancée. Shut up. Guy Kernberger shook his head. It should have come as no surprise to Lord Wolfrey that the current Lions Gang nobles would reject him. If he truly believed that he would win them over so easily, then he is tragically optimistic. Does he have zero understanding of what his grandmother did to them? He knows the facts, but he has yet to grasp how much the Lions Gangs hate her or how much resentment has accumulated over the years, Alexis replied. I am aware of the grave injustice that Lady Veronica inflicted upon Mother, but as I never experienced them firsthand, I never think about them too deeply. Alexis's mother was a Lions Gang noble. In her keenness to escape Veronica's abuse, she had consulted Boniface's first wife directly, and with Boniface's support, married into Kernberger. Veronica's methods had put his mother at her wit's end, but she had resolved not to waste any time dwelling on those she disliked once she was free of them. All that Alexis knew about his mother's past were things he had pieced together from the warnings he had received prior to visiting the castle for the first time for his debut. One that he still clearly remembered was his mother telling him not to get close to her during their visit, as it would only bring him harm. He had been introduced as Guy Kernberger's son and spent his time in the castle with his father and his father's first wife rather than with his mother. Thus, his connection into the Lions Gangs has appeared to be non-existent. Now that Alexis was older, he could see just how far his parents and his father's first wife had gone to keep Veronica from noticing him, to keep him safe. It had been wise of Alexis' parents to act with such caution. At the time, Veronica had considered it far more important to eliminate key figures within the Lions Gang faction than to target the son of a neutral Gabe. As a result, Alexis had spoken to her once when first greeting her, and then never again. Even when it had come time to seek out potential retainers for her beloved grandson, she had seen him only as the son of the ever-stubborn Guy Kernberger. In short, Alexis had very little experience with Veronica. He had seen her as someone who was by some means more powerful than Lord Sylvester, the Ob himself, but his opinion of her had run no deeper than that. As a result, he had thought almost nothing about her later disposition. He hadn't been able to empathize with either the Lions Gangs or the Veronica faction, so he hadn't found it strange that Wilfrey was so unattached to his grandmother's pure past deeds. I won't deny that Lord Wilfrid is dispassionate about past events that didn't involve him, Alexis said. He is also optimistic to a fault. However, he truly was an exemplary lord before he'd returned from the Royal Academy and witnessed the impact of the Purge. What changed exactly? Above all else, he began to view Lady Rosamine as an enemy, and in the strangest of ways. He also suddenly began demanding that the other Archduke candidates support him when necessary and give him the credit for their accomplishments, since he's the next Ob. Alexis knew that Oswald had spent years laying the groundwork for his lord to take the Archducal seat, but Wilfrid had never before tried to steal the other candidates' achievements. On the contrary, he had been actively against it. Yeah, he was actively against it when Oswald first suggested it to him. That we saw, anyway. He had said as much to Rosamine during the Royal Academy's award ceremony, yet now he was arguing that it was only common sense for one's fiancé and younger siblings to surrender their accomplishments. Lord Wilfrid confidently declares that such is the way of greater duchies, and that Ehrenfest has followed this practice since long ago, Alexis said. Still, I cannot say it feels right to me. The way of greater duchies, Guy Kernberger mused. It is certainly the case that when half-siblings are competing for the position of Ob, full siblings trade credit among one another. Trade credit, not steal credit. However, throughout his engagement, Lord Wilfrid has already secured his position as the next Archduke. There's no need for him to steal the achievements of others. He then paused, a distant look in his eyes, and let out a heavy sigh. It is widely known that Lady Veronica gave Lord Sylvester the credit for his retainer's work. So one could say that Ehrenfest's Archducal family has been using such methods for quite some time. Alexis was struck with the urge to put his head in his hands and groan. In a sense, Wilfrid had been right. The problem was that his long ago referred specifically to the height of Veronica's power. Such horrible behavior, which was common among retainers of the former Veronica faction, was precisely the reason why so many thought Wilfrid was carrying on Veronica's legacy. At this rate, the Lions Gang nobles will only think less and less of him. Could I have prevented this by taking more interest in Lady Veronica's actions, Alexis asked, searching for potential culpability. You would have struggled to challenge Lord Wilfrid alone, the Gabe replied. That said, his change is all too sudden. Do you have any idea what might have inspired it? Even the Archduke lost retainers. Lord Wilfrid was certainly no exception. Alexis immediately understood his assignment, identify the source of the change, and eliminate it. He fell into thought so much had happened that might have been responsible. In his day-to-day life, the biggest change has been that his head attendant, Oswald, was removed from service, though it was presented as his resignation. He had said to his fellow retainers, I am being relieved of duty for fear that my faction may cause problems. The Ob has ordered that I present it as my willing resignation so that our lord does not grow to resent his father. Then shortly after, he had begged Wolfried for permission to resign, saying with tears in his eyes, my service is no longer what's best for you. His family had been told to stand down for similar reasons, so Wolfried had lost 4 adult retainers in total. Lord Wolfried cursed himself for being too weak to save his longest-serving and most loyal vassal, Alexis continued. It seemed to me that it was because his fiancée didn't share his frustration and pain during the feast celebrating spring that he lost his temper. Sometime after, Alexis had seen Wolfried being consoled by his name-sworn retainer, Bartold. The Princess of the Lies Gang is surely celebrating that Oswald has finally been torn away from you, Bartold had said. She is of a faction that loathes Lady Veronica after all. Wow, Bartold! Jerk! What are you doing that for? You're supposed to be on their side here. Hello? Alexis went on, I would assume that his emotional instability has come from losing the man who was serving as his son, him even before his baptism. Lord Wolfried was raised by Lady Veronica as he was much, much closer to Oswald than the archducal couple. Gabe Kernberger pondered. There is a chance that, without his head attended to scold or comfort him, the selfishness mounting within Lord Wolfried is finally leaking out. Could this be an unconscious protest demanding that the Ob return his retainers to him? Possibly. Alexis crossed his arms. He knew that the sudden change in his lord was troublesome, but he had never considered the situation from his father's perspective. Seeking the advice of a third party was always important. Wanting to make the most of such a rare opportunity to get his father's advice, Alexis put forward a few other theories. I think the change in his work assessment environment has been significant as well. Neutral and Lies Gang nobles are now the most prominent figures in the castle, thus Lord Wolfried is no longer surrounded by nobles of the former Veronica faction. In other words, he's no longer surrounded by those who will praise his every move, the Geep said. Alexis nodded, though he was taken aback by his father's harsh tone. Overall, his retainers are the opinion that positive reinforcement is the most productive approach, but Lord Bonifacius now barks at him almost non-stop. Lord Bonifacius? Yes, the work that Lord Ferdinand did in the temple has been given to Lady Rosamund, while his duties in the castle have been given to Lord Bonifacius and Lord Wolfried. Wolfried has found himself with dramatically more work and dramatically less free time. He also needed to meet with Bonifacius whenever it was time to carry out his new duties, and it seemed that the big old granddad, overflowing with love for his granddaughter, was suffocating him. Alexis understood why his lord was so frustrated, but he couldn't wrap his head around the complaints that Wolfried so often made. I wish Rosamund would do this work instead. Rosamund sure has it easy. She gets to relax in the temple. Rosamund is going to be the next first wife, yet she doesn't take her duties seriously. Hello? She does not get to relax in the temple. Did you not remember that when you went to the temple for a day? She's got even more work now because she's having to help because Ferdinand's gone. Probably not as much as it would have been had Hartman and the others not been there and been trained. But still, she still has more work to do. So it's not like she's just sitting there reading while you get to do work. No. She has to do work. A lot. To where I think she's still giving up a lot of her free time for reading. For this. So yeah, don't be saying things you don't even understand that. Wolfried always voiced these gripes with such confidence, but Ferdinand had rarely spent much time in the castle. Anyone could guess that his temple work was the greater burden. On top of that, Rosamund only had one adult scholar, Hartmut. Even including her apprentice scholars when it came to desk work, she was absolutely starved of manpower. Lord Wolfried has 3 adult scholars and 3 apprentice scholars, Alexis continued. If working with Lord Bonifacius is causing him so much trouble, could he not just order them to take care over for him? Did you make that suggestion? The scholars refused. They said they couldn't possibly do such work without the necessary experience, especially as they would need to take the blame for any errors they might make. That's the whole problem here. You gotta take responsibility for the work you do. Just as Melkor's retainers needed to undergo training before they could start performing their duties in the temple, Wolfried and his retainers would need to be trained for their handover. The problem was that Ehrenfest's archducal family was small, and the archducal couple couldn't spend their time educating their son when they were so short-staffed themselves. But Bonifacius had been the only person they could ask to give Wolfried archducal lessons. Geeb Kernberger shook his head. If your lord desires better working conditions and his only option is to speed along his handover training, has anything else changed? Alexis paused, trying to remember what else Wolfried had complained about, then clapped his hands together in realization. He seems to be immensely unhappy about the Ob taking a second wife. Really? I thought it was a welcome move by Ob Ehrenfest, considering how long he spent stubbornly refusing the idea. What in the world does Lord Wolfried take an issue with? Wolfried hadn't said anything in the dining hall when he first learned about the engagement, but he had grumbled nonstop on returning to his chambers. Rosemine's already a Liesgang bride, he had said. I would rather see Father take her as a second wife than Brunhilde. Really? Dude! Oh my god! You would rather your father take your adopted sister as his second wife. Dude, what is wrong with you? That's messed up. She's supposed to be your fiancé. This is Rosemine's fault. She's the princess of the Liesgangs, but can't even keep them under control. Duh! She's been trying to avoid them. What do you expect? Alexis' heart sank as he remembered what had happened next. Wolfried had said to Charlotte to help him convince the Ob to rethink his decision, then asked Brunhilde to cancel the engagement. They had both refused, of course, and Alexis had struggled to console his lord after the fact. Wolfried had been on the verge of a panic attack. I think he was so displeased because Lady Brunhilde is more or less his age, Alexis said, and her engagement to the Ob means that one of Lady Rosemine's retainers is joining the Archducal family. Still, taking a second wife to gain control over a faction and assist with the delegation of desk work is the duty of an Ob. The day shall come when Lord Wolfried would need to take one himself. Ehrenfest's Archducal family was already unusually small. It was hard to imagine the next Archduke going without a second wife as well. Correct, Alexis replied. I personally agreed with Ob Ehrenfest's decision to marry a Liesgang, but the idea is unpopular among my fellow retainers. Many of them oppose the thought of giving the Liesgangs more power and putting Lady Rosamine one step closer to becoming the next Ob. All of a sudden, Alexis realized something. Out of everyone in Ehrenfest, Wolfried and his retainers were the only ones opposed to Sylvester taking Brunhilde as his second wife. Most of the former Veronica faction had already been detained and punished, so every single Gieb understood and approved of the Archduke's decision to take a Liesgang bride to gain more control over the duchy's dominant faction. Perhaps this distaste for second wives is another lingering consequence of being educated by Lady Veronica, the Gieb mused. That woman refused to allow her husband to take one and came to Lord Wolfried's defense, or Sylvester's defense, whenever he refused to remarry. If what you say is true, then it will be almost impossible for Lord Wolfried to escape Lady Veronica's shadow. His recent change in attitude has led him to being identified as a devout member of the former Veronica faction. In fact, Alexis fell silent, cast his eyes down, and then muttered, now he views even Lampert as an enemy, simply because the latter is Lady Rosemine's elder brother. Lampert had tried to warn Wolfried that circling the Liesgang-ruled provinces for spring prayer was a bad idea. And he's a Liesgang! He's a member of the he's a biological member of the Liesgangs. So him telling you that that's not a good idea it should be founded here. Hello? It's not like it was the former Veronica faction telling him to do that. Or telling him not to do that, because then that would be suspicious. But since it's a Liesgang telling you not to go to the Liesgang areas because they will not be happy to see you, it's kind of a bad sign there. And the other retainers had doubted his loyalty ever since. Alexis had at one point tried to stand up for his colleague, only for Bartol to ask, does this mean that Kernberger stands with Lady Rosamine then? Lampert had even told Alexis not to bother. I'm used to this, he had said. Worry about yourself, else you'll end up in the same situation. From that point on, Alexis had tried not to interfere, and things had gone exactly as he had expected. Wolfried's attempt to bond with the Giebs had ended in failure, forcing him to return to the castle with his tail between his legs. Of course, he had immediately tried to blame Lampert. My lord, Lampert had responded, your failure was a result of your own refusal to heed our warnings, and your underestimation of the Liesgang's pent-up frustration. You would never have been able to undo years of suffering through our one spring prayer. This is something that must be worked through gradually. Yeah, you're not going to be able to fix this, overnight. You're going to have to be able to fix this over time. It's going to be a gradual thing. It's not going to be something that's going to be fixed real quickly. Alexis had considered that a reasonable explanation. Wolfried would simply need to reflect on his actions and try to do better next time. However, everyone else had dismissed Lampert as being cold and stony-hearted. I was right not to speak my thoughts, Alexis concluded. Well, what had you wanted to say? There's no use pouting about it now. Lampert and Lady Rosamine's retainers warned you what would happen, but you charged ahead anyway. An outburst like that would absolutely lead to Kernberger being treated as an enemy. Continue to keep your mouth shut. Nice, you actually kept your mouth shut at a good time. After grousing even more about Lamprett's evaluation, Wilfrid had gone straight to his name-sworn retainer Bartold, who had consoled him and stressed that he wasn't to blame. It really is a shame that nobody ever appreciates your hard work, he had said. If only Lady Rosamund and Lamprett had done their jobs properly and laid the groundwork for your visits, this never would have happened. Shut up! Bartold, you're awful! And here I thought the name-sworn people would actually be nice. No! They're not helping with this. That had cheered up Wilfrid and encouraged the other retainers to agree. Soon enough, they had all thrust the blame upon Lamprett. It was also ridiculous that Alexis had started to wonder whether it was some kind of surreal comedy act. Lamprett was in a far more pitiable situation than Wilfrid, since he was being blamed for something that wasn't at all his fault. Did your lord say nothing to you, even knowing that you had Elias gang mother, the Geeb asked? It seems that, like Lady Veronica, Lord Wilfrid views me only as a son of Geeb Kernberger. He seems to count me among our province's nobles who flatly declare themselves to be neutral, and cast aside any and all involvement in faction politics. It was true that Alexis wanted to guard his lord above all else. Unnecessary thoughts about faction politics would serve only as a distraction. At the same time, however, he had only been able to secure his current position because of an invitation from Lamprett. His fellow retainer had said that following Veronica's deposition, Wilfrid needed more neutral and Lionsgate nobles in his service. Alexis had gone along with it. These events were why Alexis was none too pleased about Lamprett receiving so much undeserved ire. But Lamprett had said that it would only be temporary. The Archducal family would soon finish regular organizing their retainers, he had declared, and the punished nobles with the For Veronica faction would return to work. Then Lord Wilfrid and the Lionsgangs would finally calm down. I doubt that'll happen anytime soon. Especially with the whole Lionsgang issue. Despite it all, Lord Wilfrid has been working hard, Alexis said. Even after the Ivory Tower incident, his lord had tried to restore his lost honor instead of simply conceding and wallowing in his misery. Because Rosamund actually helped him. So anything, he should be happy that she was actually helping him. Wilfrid was in an unfathomably difficult position. He was in the same grade as Rosamund, meaning he was constantly being compared to her, but he had still secured high enough grades to be recognized as an honor student. He has also been doing an excellent job of uniting the dormitory and was, at least until recently, on good terms with his younger siblings. Even while being reproached by the students whose families had been purged, he had carried out his duties as an Archduke candidate and taken Dunkelfelger's dinner challenge to his stride, even leading the knights to victory. That is precisely why seeing my lord degrade himself makes me so frustrated and miserable, Alexis continued. I cannot bear it. I loathe it. Where is the boy who did everything in his power to protect Lady Rosamund? I fought by his side during our match against Dunkelfelger and could hardly express the pride I felt after our victory. From the bottom of my heart, I was glad to be a guard knight, to have taken on the challenge, and to have won. Back then, Alexis had said, that was recent too! That was before the introductory tournament! Things have changed, apparently, in the past, couple weeks? A week? Jesus! Back then, Alexis had sincerely believed that everything would be okay no matter how bad the purge turned out to be. He had blindly assumed that Ehrenfest was unifying around Wilfrid and that his lord would guide everyone into a bright future. By this point, however, clinging to such a dream was foolish. Father, I now understand why you always describe factions as troublesome business. I neither know nor understand what has driven Lord Wilfrid to single-handedly revive Lady Veronica's cursed legacy, but the atmosphere in the castle is suffocating. I wish for nothing more than to resign and return to Kernberger. The Geeb sighed, then crossed his arms and tightly knit his brow. It was the same pose he always made before giving out new tasks, so Alexis straightened up on an instinct. This is as simple as you wishing to abandon your duties as a retainer simply because your lord no longer suits your preference, Geeb Kernberger said in a low voice. In that regard, you are no different from Lord Wilfrid throwing a tantrum because things have not gone as you hoped. Yes, but I think he's allowed to vent at times about how crazy things are. But he can't really abandon. He's got to try and persevere. And even if he can't, he's got to do it till the end. Until Wilfrid dismisses him. Alexis inhaled sharply. He wanted to protect, but couldn't think of a reasonable comeback. Or protest, couldn't come up with a reasonable comeback. Think of the head attendant who was dismissed, his father went on. Was he really trying to make his lord more considerate, or does he secretly continue to whisper poison in his ear? Hoping to not rot him from the inside out, you mentioned that one of Lord Wilfrid's scholars gave his name to avoid punishment. Have you questioned whether this boy can be trusted? What? A name-sworn can't defy their lord, can they? Not directly. but they can sabotage them without them knowing, which is what Bartold is doing. The life of a Namesworn retainer was quite literally in the hands of whoever they served. Alexis had not even thought to doubt Bartold. Those children were forced to give their names. The only alternative was death. They acted out of not loyalty, but self-preservation. Lady Veronica forced many to give their names to her, but there were some among them who weren't completely faithful to her. They might not be able to disobey orders, but none can say what they are thinking on the inside. Keep that danger in mind and close to heart. Once again, Alexis thought about Bartold, who had always seemed to be currying favor with his lord. Now that Guy Kernberger mentioned it, the name-swearing had made Wilfrid especially trusting of the scholar. Bartold had given many more important roles than a new retainer would normally deserve. Focus on Lord Wilfrid's work environment, Guy Kernberger said. If paperwork meant only to support the Ob is too much for him, then he surely won't be able to function when the day comes that he is the Ob proper. Unless... Could someone be tampering with his work? Ensure that no Lysgang nobles are causing trouble behind the scenes. It generally fell to scholars to help their lord or lady with paperwork, but the Guide maintained that knights were meant to have eyes everywhere. Alexis reflected on his own naivete. Standing in the room searching for signs of potential attack weren't enough. He needed to keep an eye on the paperwork itself. That said, Guy Kernberger continued, you must also reflect on your own words and deeds to ensure that you aren't provoking the Lysgangs. Have you ever given them the impression that you've forgotten the cruelties Lady Veronica inflicted upon their faction? Alexis considered that to be very likely. He didn't know much about them to begin with, but he also hadn't made an effort to learn. Open your eyes and observe all that your lord does, the Geeb said, his tone chastising. Open your ears to the voices of all who speak to him. Pay close attention to Lord Wilfrid, whom you must protect as his knight. If you see him stray from his path, drag him back onto it. That is your job as a retainer. I do not want you to return home as a coward who would rather run away from the unpleasant than face it head on. Again, Alexis swallowed hard, but what if my absolute best still isn't enough? That's simple. Gather enough evidence to prove that your lord is a failed Archduke candidate, then petition the Ob to disinherit him and relieve his retainers of duty. If you return under those circumstances, I will welcome you with open arms. Take responsibility for your work. It would be easy for Alexis to resign, whereas proving that Wilfrid was an incompetent lord would be anything but. He would need to observe him carefully and investigate his surroundings closely. After speaking with his father, Alexis had realized that he hadn't been trying hard enough as a retainer. People would surely label him a failure of a guard knight before they even considered branding Lord Wilfrid a failed Archduke candidate. I apologize for my shameful remarks, Alexis said to the Geeb. From this day forth, I will put my absolute all into serving Lord Wilfrid. In truth, he was frustrated to have been scolded and accused of working in half measures, but he now saw a future he could advance toward. Alexis had arrived at Kernberger feeling suffocated, but now he knew what needed to be done. First, he would carefully investigate Wilfrid's surroundings. Then he would work with Lampret to figure out what had caused our lord to change so drastically. His lips curled into a competitive smile. He now had something that he needed to do. Reflection and envy. Okay, this is Wilfrid's point of view, I think. Reflection and envy. The news that father would be taking Brunhilde as his second wife had made the blood drain from my face. A fake smile and superficial congratulations weren't enough to get me through the rest of our meal, but my calm quickly fell apart once I was back in my chambers. Vanessa, what should we do? I asked my head attendant. At this rate, father is going to take Brunhilde as a second wife, and this will be all my fault. How is it your fault? During our family meeting, my frustrations had finally become too much to bear. I had exploded at my parents and criticized my father for not taking a second wife to ease the growing fears of the nobility. My outburst was surely the reason he had now rushed into this engagement with Brunhilde, a member of the Lysgang faction who had yet to take a fiancé and was young enough not to impact mother's pregnancy or delivery. Lady Charlotte. Oh, this is Charlotte. Never mind. Lady Charlotte, do calm down, Vanessa replied. Regardless of whether your criticisms played a role in this, it was ultimately the Ob's decision to take a second wife. Furthermore, there is no mistaking that he needs to marry a Lysgang to put the other nobles back in order. I see no reason for your unease when after years of skirting the issue, your father has finally listened to you. She was right. I certainly had said that my father needed to take a Lysgang as a second wife. As a result, one of my sister's precious retainers was now in a terribly difficult position. She suggested it! But then again, they don't know that. So that's a moot point right there. This new engagement would do plenty to benefit the Archducal family, but Brunhilde had very little to gain from it. She would be welcomed as a second wife to put the Lies gangs in order, but she was still underage. I struggled to see how she would manage to control the older members of her family. It was equivalent to someone ordering me to make Lord Bonifacius and my uncle agree with one another, despite I being so much younger than them both. The very thought made me dizzy. To make matters worse, although everyone had agreed that bringing Brunhilde into the family fold would make the Groschel reconstruction a lot easier to manage, nobody had acknowledged that my parents had disrupted the schedule to begin with. No matter how one dressed it, Brunhilde was being made to marry father to remedy the consequences of my mother's pregnancy. As I understood it, Brunhilde had accepted such active roles in the printing industry and reconstruction effort because she was due to become the next Guy Groschel. No matter how much her new engagement benefited the province, she was surely devastated to be losing her position simply to satisfy father's son demands. All you have to do is talk to Brunhilde and ask her what's going on. I don't know if she would say anything, but at the very least you should pose the question. What is going on? Why is this happening? I recalled my own heartache after losing my chance to become the next Ob because of my brother's engagement. Father has a tendency not to realize how people feel on the inside. He likely has no idea how much I detest his prioritizing Wilfried over me. Because it was already decided that Wilfried would become the next Ob Ehrenfest, Brunhilde would never ever have a chance to mother the new duchy's next ruler. A great honor in itself. The future that most second wives would wish for and strive toward would be closed off to her from the outset. On top of everything else, father was completely devoted to mother and had spent so very long declaring that he would neither wanted nor needed a second wife. Not even someone as young and attractive as Brunhilde was likely to win his affections. Perhaps this was uncouth for me to say about my own father, but his love had always bordered on the obsessive. Brunhilde was a dazzling star of the Royal Academy with plenty of admirers, not only from other duchies but from the sovereignty as well. Yet here she was, resigning herself to a loveless marriage, and to a man old enough to be her father. The mere thought of ending up in such a position myself sent a shiver down my spine. Rather than taking Brunhilde, father should have found an older widow unable to bear a child, I concluded. Vanessa shook her head to me. You may not approve of this engagement, Lady Charlotte, but there is nothing that you can do to prevent it. Guy Groschel has already expressed his approval. If you feel that you have wronged Brunhilde, then think of ways to improve her future. Help her in ways she would sincerely appreciate. The feast celebrating spring ended in a commotion after father's engagement to Brunhilde was announced. The nobles then started returning to their respective provinces, and the castle became a little bit quieter. In the meantime, I summoned Brunhilde to my room. She was visiting the castle to examine the western building. I realize that these are busy times, so please forgive this inconvenience, I said. Oh no, I was overjoyed to receive your invitation, Brunhilde replied and sat down with a smile. I too have much to discuss with you. I got my attendant to pour us some tea, and my eyes wandered to the necklace adorning Brunhilde's breast. It contained the engagement face-stone that father had given her, and as long as she wore it, she was in an equivalent position to the rest of the archducal family. First of all, allow me to apologize, I said. It was luckily my fault that you were asked to become the second wife to begin with. I never thought that my outburst would cause you to shoulder such an immense burden. My actions were unforgivably shallow. There's nothing for you to worry about, Lady Charlotte. The Ob made this decision himself. I shook my head, conscious that she was only being considerate. If my father desired a Lies Gangs woman who would not affect mother's pregnancy, he could have chosen an older widow with more socializing experience. At the very least, she would have found it easier to make your family comply. That much was a given. I wouldn't be able to face off against Uncle or Lord Bonifacius, but I could easily be able to deal with Wilfried, Melkor, or their future children. Not to mention, nobody would bat an eye about a widow older than mother not receiving father's love or favor. Lady Charlotte, do you expect my socializing to be inadequate? Brunhilde asked. Not in the least. We have arranged tea parties together in the Royal Academy. I'm well aware of your talents. Brunhilde's assistants had allowed me to smoothly interact with top-ranking duchies when I was still only a first year. Ehrenfest had socialized only as a bottom-ranking duchy before then, but she had advised me on how to act and guided me through the unknown. I could no longer count how many times Rosemine's retainers had saved me, be it through their experience attending tea parties with top-ranking duchies or their knack for providing tea and sweets to the taste of our guests. Bringing the Lies Gangs under one banner will save Ehrenfest and do much to assist father and me, I said. However, I cannot see what you gain from it. Uniting an entire faction is an overwhelming task for an adult, much less a mere student. After sipping her tea, Brunhilde gave me a troubled smile. Though I appreciate your concern for me, Lady Charlotte, an aged widow simply would not do. Plus, there is no need to unify the Lies Gangs. I was stunned, unable to respond with anything more than a quizzical stare. We didn't need to unify the Lies Gangs? I wanted to ask what she meant, but she continued unprompted. Lady Veronica's reign of tyranny over the Lyskings lasted much too long. The elders among them, those who endured her abuse the longest, are too angry and resentful to even consider agreeing with the Archducal family. To be frank with you, if we did allow the Lyskings to unite under a second wife, it would inspire them to take drastic action, to eliminate as much of the current Archducal family as would be necessary to position Lady Rosamund as the next Ob, with Lord Bonifacius as her support base. The situation could get much worse than it already is. Her warning shook me to my core. Would the Lyskings target Mother and me as well? We also suffered grandmother's abuse. The two of you would potentially escape their wrath, but not Lord Melkor. Because he is male, they would consider him a threat. Perhaps it was because Mother and I had been victims ourselves, or because we had so many Lyskings in our service, but I was shocked to hear that Melkor and I would also be scorned. As it turned out, the Lyskings hated the Archducal family as a whole, irrespective of our individual relationships with Veronica. Right now, she continued, Ehrenfest needs a second wife from the younger generation. Someone who considers Lady Veronica's reign a thing of the past, who understands that Lady Rosamund does not want to be the next Ob, and who can work with the Archducal family to move our duchy forward instead of merely serving as a figurehead so that her family can sow dissent. I couldn't help but sigh in awe. Brunhilde understood the dangers of the Lyskings so much better than I did as a member of the Archducal family. My engagement was announced, and it subsequently became known that I am taking a more active role in the reconstruction of Groshel, Brunhilde said. As a result, the internal power balance has split between those who desire Lady Rosamund as the next Ob and those who wish to maintain the status quo now that the Archduke is more pliable to our desires. My intention is not to unify the Lyskings under one banner, quite the opposite. I want to keep them apart so that they don't pose a threat to the Archducal family. Brunhilde was carefully observing her house and considering her every move, but I could not understand why she was so devoted to the Archducal family. You were meant to become the next Guy Groshel, and with any luck, take a groom of your own, I said. Surely becoming my father's second wife is not what you truly desire. One of my guard knights, Lengert, was a Groshel native, so I consider myself quite knowledgeable about the province. Brunhilde was the daughter of the Guib's first wife, and was being raised as a successor since he had no male heirs to speak of. The kind of education needed to rule was not the same one needed to be married into another house. As someone who had gone from being a potential archduchess to merely the future wife of a foreign noble, I was well aware of the troubles that came with the sudden change of position. On top of everything else, Guy Groshel surely hadn't accounted for his daughter being taken by the Ob. The province was bound to struggle without a successor, I thought, but Brunhilde gave a faint smile and shook her head. There is no need for you to be so troubled, Lady Charlotte. The truth is, this engagement is my only hope. I simply blinked at her, not having expected that at all. Brunhilde's expression turned contemplative, then she gave me a sound-blocking magic tool. Her bright, noble smile never so much as faltered as she said, You must keep this a secret from everyone, even Lungert. My father's second wife has given birth to a son. I took a sharp breath. In other words, Brunhilde was losing her chance to become the next Guy Groshel, irrespective of this engagement. I was no stranger to the heartache of one's hard work suddenly coming to a naught, simply because of an unfair disparity between the genders. Heck, Georgine suffered that same thing, because she was set to be the next Archduchess of Ehrenfest, but then Sylvester was born, and, well, we all know what happened with that. Back then, nothing had worked to console me, so I could only stare at Brunhilde as I racked my brain for a response. I do not know what to say, was my eventual reply. At the very least, I can understand how you feel. There have been times when I wished that I were born a man. Ah, yes, you were in an unfortunate position yourself. I relate to your feelings of powerlessness all too well. We gave each other wooden smiles. Though we had only exchanged a few words, our similar plights had given us something to bond over. Father rejoiced at the birth of his son, then coincidentally decided to postpone the announcement of his successor, Brunhilde explained. My replacement has not yet been made official, but neither can I take a husband in Groshel. Doing so would give rise to all sorts of conflict. On that path, my only option is to wait for the future. When either my little sister takes a groom or the boy starts to grow up. In either case, I will not be the Geep. Oh, what a fit mother threw. Were the son to become the next Geep, Groshel, his mother, the second wife, would take precedence over the first. Brunhilde's mother would become more and more neglected after her daughters were married off. Ah, that reminds me. One of the reasons father put Wilfrid with Rosamund was to protect mother's position. I sighed. The moment Brunhilde was ousted from her position as the next Guy Groshel, she would need to start worrying about her mother's future. She wouldn't even have a chance to grieve her own loss. But of course, Brunhilde continued, Mother rejoiced when I told her about my engagement to Ob Ehrenfest. The mother of the Archduke's second wife would never be neglected, would she? I don't know. Becoming the Archduke's second wife was now normally cause for concern. How would one's status change when the position of Ob passed to the next generation? Brunhilde, however, was a retainer serving my sister, our duchy's future first wife. Barring any extraordinary circumstances, she would continue to thrive even after the generational shift. Thus, I'd rather welcome this engagement, Brunhilde remarked. You must consider my situation from every angle. Would you not agree that such an influential position, one that will give me power over future Giebs, is something to be excited about? I will stand above even my own father, whose whims I have for so long been a slave to. Her amber eyes narrowed into a mischievous squint, and an impish smile spread across her lips. Like me, she was losing the future she had spent her entire life working toward, but she showed not a trace of despair. How are we so different? Compared to me, she was like a dazzling light, refusing to let the present drag her down as she marched over onward. More than Groschel, she continued, I worry about how you and Lady Florencia feel. Is my sunrise, the second wife, not displeasing to either of you? Oh no, how could we ever be displeased about this engagement? You were giving us such crucial assistance during these formidable times. Only a true fool would speak ill of your decision. No sooner had the words passed my lips than I clapped a hand over my mouth in realization there was one member of the Archducal family who had been protesting Brunhilde's new position. Could it be that Wolfried said something to you? Brunhilde's smile widened ever so slightly, a silent yes. Wolfried had told me that he was going to protest to father, but it had never even crossed my mind that he might complain to Brunhilde. The engagement was a decision to be made between parents. No matter what he said to her, she was unable to end it herself. My brother, the next Archduke, would complain to you about an engagement decided by the Ob for the sake of the duchy, I muttered. Unbelievable. I cannot express how sorry I am. Perhaps because of the education they received from grandmother, neither my father nor Wolfried views second wives in a positive light. Wolfried was so opposed to the idea that he had even tried to make us come together as siblings to protest the engagement. He had gotten very emotional, saying things like, no good can come from taking a second wife. Aren't you worried about mother? That's cold, and Rosemont could take care of unifying the Lias gangs. It concerned me that he prioritized his emotions over political decision-making, and it was fairly exasperating when he told me that our sharing a mother obligates me to obey him. Yeah, right. The Purge had greatly reduced the size of the Veronica faction, and now mother and father were doing their best to get the Lias gangs, our next big threat, under control. This was all to ensure that Wolfried would become the next Ob, but he seemed painfully oblivious to that fact. Lady Veronica's education, Brunhilde asked, covering her mouth wide with her mouth with her hand to indicate surprise. I never would have expected such opinions from Lord Wolfried, considering how hard he fought for Hannelore to become his second wife. I agreed. It was surprisingly common for Wolfried to say one thing and didn't do the complete opposite. In the past, whenever he said or did something that concerned me, I assumed that he was letting Oswald manipulate him. He seemed concerned about Lias gang nobles securing more power, which suggests that his former Veronica faction retainers are continuing to influence him. I had thought that his twisted thought process would improve after Oswald relieved of duty. Now we can only hope. Relieved of duty, Brunhilde repeated, her eyes wide. I was told that Oswald resigned. He was relieved of duty in secret and allowed to pass it off as a resignation. Wolfried is guaranteed to become the next Ob now that he is engaged to Rosemond, but Oswald was simply too dedicated to Lady Veronica's methods. For that reason, I pleaded with Mother to remove him, but we could not act so openly. Relieving him of duty before the purge would have risked him leaking information to others in the former Veronica faction. So Mother determined it best to instead isolate him from the others at the Royal Academy. There he was cornered and told to choose between resigning or being relieved of duty upon his return. He chose the former, though due to keep all this a secret. I thank you ever so much, Brunhilde said, smiling. It seemed that I had obtained her trust by offering her a secret in return for the one she had given me. Even now that Oswald is gone, Wolfried comes across as far more emotional of late. Do you know why that is? He had started ordering me to help him as his full sister, but I wasn't sure whether he was making similar demands of those in Rosamond's service. Perhaps there is an issue with the new head attendant? Oswald would often tell me to cede my accomplishments, but Wolfried was unaware of this. Now, however, we should conclude that rather than working in the shadows, Lord Wolfried's retainers are directly instigating him to act in this way. Through this discussion with Brunhilde, it felt like I was beginning to see the truth beneath my brother's irritating behavior. Our conclusions were little more than baseless extrapolations, however. Further investigation was necessary. I do not know the details myself, I said, but it seems very likely. This is so blatantly unnatural that even Wolfried will come to distrust his retainers. I shall keep an eye on this situation. It really is worrisome that the supposed next Ob is the most concerning factor in all this. I exhaled slowly and picked up my teacup. We both took a moment to enjoy our drinks, and thus ended our discussion about my brother. To return to your original concern, Brunhilde, fear not, my mother and I take no issue with your engagement. I still maintain that the burden is too great for someone of your age to bear alone, and I regret taking such a capable attendant for my sister, but these are separate matters. Not only was Brunhilde leaving to become a second wife, but Riarda had also returned to father's service. Rosamund had already been in desperate need of more retainers, but so her situation right now was surely dire. I intend to serve Lady Rosamund until I graduate, Brunhilde assured me with a consoling smile, and if you're concerned about Riarda, she returned to the Archduke's service of her own volition. She said that Lady Rosamund spends very little time in the castle and would scarcely feel her absence as a result. So my father hadn't ordered Rosamund to give up Riarda. Perhaps I was viewing him a little too harshly. Lady Charlotte, does Lady Florencia truly welcome me? Brunhilde asked. Certainly, Mother has been pushing Father to take a second wife for years to help resolve the archducal family mana shortage. For that second wife to be of the same faction and capable of dealing with the Lyskings, well, what more could she ask for? You are very welcome indeed. Finding a second wife who would not butt heads with the first was no easy task, but Brunhilde was perfect. She was of the same faction and could provide support to both Mother and Rosamund, not to mention, unlike my sister, there was no need to teach her about the female socializing. Her being underage also removed any worries of the engagement affecting Mother's pregnancy. Indeed, there was no better choice in the world. It is relieving to hear that, Brunhilde said. In which case, might I ask you to help me integrate into the archducal family? I would have asked Lady Rosamund, but she isn't here in the castle for me to consult. And the last thing I want to do is burden her further. Naturally, I will provide you with my full support, I replied at once with a firm nod. If you ever require my assistance, then you need only contact me. I, too, would like to make things easier for my sister. To say that Rosamund was busy right now was an understatement. She was having to take on Uncle's temple work and educate Melkor. She had also mentioned taking the playroom children into the temple. Of course, that was still only scratching the surface. Even when it came to the printing industry or welcoming merchants from other duchies, Rosamund was expected to do far too much. In particular, Mother and Father were focusing on internal noble politics this year, which meant that Rosamund was almost entirely responsible for the more hands-on duties such as directing the commoners. In an ideal world, I said, I would be helping Rosamund in the temple, but there is no such desk work to be done here in the castle as a result of the purge. Or so much desk work. Plus, I must admit I am not yet used to how things operate there. I would only drag everyone else down. Lady Rosamund believes that people should focus on their strengths and allow others to compensate for their weaknesses, so evidenced by Feline and Daniel playing such valuable roles in her retinue, she giggled, a teasing look in her eyes. To be honest with you, Lady Charlotte, you have already been tremendously useful to us. Lady Rosamund works with such dedication that when we say it's all for your sake. It seemed that I was being useful to Rosamund after all. How wonderful. She continued, I would also like to assist my lady. Lady Rosamund cannot socialize with the Lyskings, or rather any such socializing would not benefit either party. What do you mean, I asked. Rosamund was often unpredictable, but there was always a reason for her actions, and in the end, her ideas would usually lead to good conclusions. As you know, Lady Rosamund was raised in the temple. She didn't spend any time with her wider family before her baptism. Even after she was baptized, the political climate meant she was forbidden from meeting with them at all but a few carefully selected occasions. I cannot say I have ever seen her socialize with them. I knew that Rosamund had been keeping her distance from most of her family to avoid them hailing her as the next Ob Ehrenfest, but it was news to me that she had never socialized with them at all. As a result, Brunhilde continued, Lady Rosamund cannot empathize with her house's anger toward and obsession with Lady Veronica, nor can she truly understand what they desire. In all likelihood, the Lyskings will end up disillusioned with her and in despair. I speak from experience, for I went through such a period myself. Again, I was surprised. In my eyes, Brunhilde had always been Rosamund's loyal retainer. She elaborated, not only is Lady Rosamund unable to grasp her house's desires, but she also seems ill-equipped for conventional socializing. Likely because she was asleep in her Dorif for 2 years and entered the Royal Academy without proper experience. But she made use of her own unique methods to obtain connections with top-ranking duchies and the royal family. I cannot hope to mimic that form of socializing myself. Even after seeing it up close in the Royal Academy, I cannot say that I understand it. Unlike my sister, Brunhilde had socialized with her family since she was a child, as was normal. Furthermore, because she had received a Gives education, she was an expert at using traditional methods to deal with other nobles. Then there was my sister, who had been raised in the temple, was completely unpredictable, and was very difficult to secure a meeting with. It was easy to guess that which one a Lysganger who wanted influence over the archducal family would prefer working with. That said, I continued, I agreed that Rosamund would struggle to perform the more traditional socializing that the Lias Kings expect of her, Brunhilde. Because she had received no formal training and had needed to learn on the spot, her socializing was entirely unlike that of a normal bottom-ranking duchy. Hold on, how far have I gotten? As stated earlier, I wish to keep the Lias Kings divided, but Lady Rosamund is not suited to such delicate maneuvering. It seems best to have her stick to socializing with other duchies. I agreed. Going forward, Ehrenfest needed to present itself as not a spineless duchy eager to obey those at the top of the rankings, but a strong duchy that was determined to make its own voice heard. At present, I do not believe there is much point in teaching bottom-ranking socializing to my sister, I said. Doing so will only cause confusion when she is meeting with the royal family or top-ranking duchies. Instead, we should push for the generational shift and start bringing the rest of the duchy up to her level. Brunhilde gave a firm nod of agreement. It was reassuring to know that we shared the same goal, but I wished I could share her strength as well. Were you not frustrated to lose your position as the next Geeb and to have the job of containing the Lias Kings forced upon you, I asked. When my future as an Archduchess was taken from me, it was quite some time before I regained my footing. I was hoping to learn from your experience so that I could do better in the future. Brunhilde knit her brow as if pondering her answer. It would be a lie to say that I wasn't disheartened. Even now I wish to help Groschel grow and turn it into a city that can post merchants from other duchies. However, while I may have lost my future as a Geeb, I am still Lady Rosamund's attendant. There are duties for me to complete and a path for me to tread. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. In truth, I was so busy attending my lady at the Royal Academy that I seldom had time to feel down. In that case, will you not feel the loss more keenly once you become a second wife and cease being her retainer? Not at all. I do feel some pressure due to the lack of time, but I do not feel sad. The lack of time? Yes, there are only 3, maybe 4 years before Lady Rosamund comes of age, resigns from her position as High Bishop, and starts living in the castle as the next Ob's future wife. That is how long I have to take control of the Lias Kings for her and learn to socialize like a proper woman of the archducal family. I must compensate for Lady Rosamund's weaknesses and ensure that she can live a life of comfort. Those are my duties as a retainer. 3-4 years. How old is Rosamund? Was in her 3rd year, so she would be 12 right now, and once she goes into her 4th year, she'll be 13. So yeah, she does have 3 years at least. Even after her graduation, Brunhilde would remain Lady Rosamund's retainer at heart and do everything in her power as the Archduke's second wife to make her days easier. Her resolve was stronger than I expected, and seeing her proud, confident smile made me feel envious and inferior. Lady Charlotte, will you offer me your assistance? But of course, let us support Rosamund together. I gave Brunhilde a smile and a nod, but my facade did nothing to ease the discomfort inside of me. It was like there was a heavy weight pulling down on my heart. I now understood why Brunhilde wanted to become Ehrenfest's second wife, and that she had her own reasons for supporting the archducal family. My initial concerns had been resolved, but I was still in low spirits long after our discussion concluded. Vanessa eyed me carefully. You still seem down, milady. Might I ask what the two of you discussed? I know nothing of what transpired after the sound blockers came out. She sounded concerned, but what could I say to her? I proceeded with the utmost caution, not wanting to spill any of the secrets we had promised to keep. Just as Langert feared, Brunhilde will no longer be the next Geeb Groschel. But she is not particularly depressed about that fact. She said that she remains Rosamund's attendant and still has that path to follow. I was ever so shocked. Vanessa gave me a look of surprise. She knew exactly how I felt after losing my future as an archduchess. I was aware that Lady Brunhilde had a strong spirit, but even so. She told me that she is becoming the second wife for Lady Rosamund's sake to help her when she comes of age and leaves the temple. I promised to assist her with this effort. Your discussion was productive then, Vanessa asked, watching me closely. I nodded. Speaking with Brunhilde really had eased my initial concern. There is no need for me to worry about her. Brunhilde is strong, but has a clear goal in mind, and will put her all into her duties. All of my fears have been allayed, so why am I still so forlorn? I cannot help but feel that I've lost her in some way, and it makes me all the more envious. Vanessa cast her eyes down and contemplated my admission. Were you engaged in some form of competition, milady? Not at all, but, well, I've been trying to be useful to Rosamund, but I can offer only a pale shadow of the resolve and proactiveness that Brunhilde embodies. Now I feel as though my determination to repay my sister has been much too weak. Retainers and sisters have different roles to perform, Vanessa replied with a chuckle. But there was more to my concerns. Being able to work with Brunhilde to support Rosamund was exactly what I wanted, but For some reason, I felt as though I had been left out. I am overcome with nothing but envy for Brunhilde. Is your envy tinged with admiration, or does it feel more akin to jealousy? Vanessa probed. She was urging me to reflect on my feelings, so I thought back to the first time they had plagued me. My feelings were most similar to admiration. There was such a determination in her eyes as she told me her plan to continue supporting my sister long into the future, and it made me feel so incapable. I simply do not know how to face the future with such courage. There's only so far you can plan ahead, milady. You are due to marry into another duchy, and your parent partner has not even been decided yet. This is not something worth fretting over. Ah, that was true. I would eventually marry into another duchy to benefit Ehrenfest. In other words, while Brunhilde and my sister were going to have a future together, I was destined to be sent away. I had hoped that Brunhilde, Rosemont, and I would never be separated, I murmured. That we would always work together like we did in the Royal Academy. Female members of archducal families were tasked with marrying into other duchies to strengthen diplomatic ties. Small archducal families had the option of bringing a groom into their duchy so that he could offer support, but with Melkor growing up and having a skilled politician such as Brunhilde supporting Rosemont as a second wife, Ehrenfest no longer needed me. My value would come entirely from the connections made through my future marriage. I understood that it was my duty to marry into another duchy, but I disliked the thought from the bottom of my heart. Learning that fact about myself was troubling. It seems that I have grown so sad and envious precisely because Brunhilde is such a splendid retainer, I said. I will one day need to leave Ehrenfest, meaning I cannot remain Rosemont's sister forever. You need not corner yourself, my lady. I smiled at Vanessa in response, but she must have seen through my charade. Her brow furrowed in a way that made it clear she was hurting. It was the same face she had made when I was taken out of the running to become the next Ob. At this rate, I will simply worry my retainers again. I must get back on my feet somehow. As soon as that thought crossed my mind, I remembered what Brunhilde had said to me. However, while I may have lost my future as a Geeb, I am still Lady Rosemont's attendant. There are duties for me to complete and a path for me to tread. Be honest with me, Vanessa. Will Rosemont still be my big sister even when I'm in another duchy and no longer a member of the archducal family? That goes without saying. Given how close you are, I can confidently declare that not even duchy borders will sever your bond as siblings. Those words alone filled me with hope. And will I still be able to support her? But of course! The purpose of your marriage will be to tie Ehrenfest to another duchy. It will depend on where you end up, but once Lady Rosemont becomes the first wife, the two of you will have opportunities to support one another. Father said that he will do everything in his power to grant my requests when deciding which duchy I am to marry into. My desire is to go somewhere where I can continue working with my sister. If my sibling bond with Rosemont would survive even after my departure from Ehrenfest, then I had no reason to lose to Brunhilde. There would surely be times when the first wife of another duchy would be more helpful than the second wife of the previous Ob. Now that I had something to work toward, the feelings of envy and inferiority that had tormented my heart were nowhere to be found. Oh boy. 27 pages left. Defense of the West Gate. And that's all the East Gate has to report, its commander said. This is probably, I'm guessing, when Clarissa showed up. Roughly once per season, every commander in the city would gather in a meeting room near the central plaza. Today was one of those days. The summer meeting was normally the most stressful of all since it took place right after the Nobles Archduke Conference, but this year's spring meeting was causing us more than enough grief. There were reports about the tense atmosphere that had plagued winter, and the triennial shift of commanders was being done. Right, said the commander of the East Gate. Next up is the North Gate. Gunter, how's the North? I stood up. The North Gate was connected to the Nobles' Quarter, and there were knights working shifts there, too. They made it the easiest place for us to get intel on nobles. Plus, the knights often had messages for the lower city. It was the duty of soldiers stationed at the North Gate to discreetly ask about noble affairs, so when a commander asked how's the North, they really wanted to know about the Nobles' Quarter and the nobles even further north. Well, I said, I don't have any details, but the nobles who committed grave crimes were apparently caught and punished. There's still some discord on the noble side, but we don't need to be so on edge anymore, not for now at least. They finished taking back the magic tools they lent us and said that we could ease our guard. I'm also told that Lady Rosemont returned to the temple after keeping her distance all winter for her own safety. My report included details from the temple guards on top of what the knights of the North Gate had told us, which earned me some chuckles from the others. You're always so quick to get intel about Lady Rosemont, someone said. You're not troubling the temple guards, are you? Asked another. Shut it. Now that Lutz and Tully are both live in Laharls, I don't get as much intel on mine as I used to. What choice did I have but to drop by the temple while on patrol and ask around? And, nah, I wasn't bothering them in return for what they told me. I was putting in good words for them at the south gate, and even occasionally showing my face there with the new noble orphans wanting to venture into the forest. Tit for tat. If we can ease our guard, that means we can shift commanders now, right? Asked the staff commander. Probably, I replied with a shrug. Anytime we changed places, there was an adjustment period of sorts during which communication and maneuvering was more laggard than usual. We hadn't wanted to take any chances, so we decided not to move the commanders until we were no longer on high alert. No. How about we just leave it for next year, the East commander said. Then grimaced. I don't want to go north while the nobles are still tense and everything. Nobody does, the West commander interjected. The North Gate's the worst, what with nobles always being there. The West and South ones are way more comfortable. He was laughing as though it wasn't his business at all. That was when a soldier rushed in, gasping for breath. Bad news, Commander, he exclaimed. We were all commanders, so it wasn't clear which one of us he was addressing. I was going to ask when the West commander shot up and cried, What happened? A noble from the duchy has arrived without a permit. What? In mere moments, the West commander had gone from laughing at his colleague to looking white as a sheet. You didn't let them in, did you? I demanded. No, sir, the soldier replied. I did my best to stop her. She went no further, maybe because of the Archduke's barrier? Noble troubles had come out of nowhere. Worst of all, it reminded me of the incidents back when mine had been an apprentice blue shrine maiden. Not being thorough back then had cost me my daughter. Then, half a year ago, a carriage with the noble crest had forced its way into the city and kidnapped some of the Grey Priests. A noble without a permit was sure to be bad news. The noble says that she's engaged to Lord Hartmouth, the High Priest, and that she's Lady Rosemine's retainer, but can nobles from other duchies really be retainers? The noble spluttered. I won't get punished for stopping her, right? At no point had mine, Thule Lutz, or even the temple guards mentioned someone like that. Forget that noble sob story, I snapped. No permit, no entry, it's that simple. The soldier and the other commanders all stared at me in shock. Then they nodded in agreement. They must have remembered what had happened to the last commander who broke the rules. Did you use the magic tool to inform the Knight's Order, I asked? That's why I came to get the commander. There's no apprentice, and there are apprentices waiting outside. Now that the tools distributed to every soldier over the winter had been taken back, the only one that remained was those requiring the commander's permission to be used. For that reason, the soldier had run here with apprentices in tow. The Westgate commander rushed over to the window, threw it open, and started waving his arms around in a frantic display. I give permission, he bellowed at the top of his lungs. He gives permission, cried the apprentice, waving closest to the window, flailing his arms in the same way. The adults passing by must have seen the gathered soldiers and deduced that something serious was happening, because they started relaying the message as well. Soon a wave of shouts and gesturing rolled down the main street toward the West Gate. As for me, I sped out of the meeting room as soon as the first apprentice had shouted in response. I raced down the stairs and rushed outside. Everyone was staring toward the western gate. I did the same just in time to see a red light shoot up into the air. The magic tool had been activated. All right, I shouted, then looked to the north gate. Another light narrowing the one from the magic tool shot up in response, signaling that the knight stationed there had acknowledged the call and would send it word to the Knight's Order. After seeing both lights, the nearby apprentices smiled up at the grave-looking commander, still watching from the window, then waved a red cloth. The north gate couldn't be seen from the meeting room, so he was indicating that a light had appeared there as well. We're running to the west gate, I shouted to the other commanders at the window. No matter what happens, we can't let that noble through. I don't care what it takes. She's not getting into the city. Before they could even respond, I started sprinting to the west gate. The apprentice soldiers followed after me. Be on your guard, everyone. A noble from another duchy is trying to enter the city, I shouted to the citizens we passed on the street. In the sky above, 2 high beams flew over our heads. By the time I reached the west gate, the north gate's knights were questioning the noble and the girl accompanying her. One of the girls was wearing her hair up, meaning she had come of age, but she still looked fairly young. The other looked closer to 20. Now this is rare. I couldn't believe my eyes. Most noble women didn't even want to be seen by commoners. They would refuse to come out of their carriages and instead communicate through their servants. These 2 girls, however, were speaking with the knights directly. Even their attire was unusual, at least by noble standards. They were wearing fairly plain clothes that looked to be traveling attire. They were clearly suspicious. The women were both wearing blue capes, which I'm pretty sure confirmed that they were from another duchy. I wasn't sure which duchy wore the color blue, but the knights definitely were. They're being a lot more polite than usual. Are these nobles from a big deal duchy? The knights were speaking with the older woman, but the younger one seemed to be the main noble, based on how everyone kept double-checking things with her at least. I understood a few bits and pieces about noble hierarchy from watching mine and her guard knights, as well as from her temple attendants, but that was about it. I was really out of my depth here. Hold on, shouldn't we be searching their carriage right about now? I nudged one of the Westgate soldiers, all the while keeping an eye on the knights and the women, and whispered, Hey, where's their carriage? Seeing the quality of their transport or the crest emblazoned on it would surely tell me something about the girl making all these wild assertions. If she really was mine's retainer, maybe we'd even find one of Tule's hairpins in her luggage. Unfortunately for me, things weren't that simple. They don't have a carriage, answered the soldier. How don't they have a carriage? They flew here on those, what's the word again? High beasts, right? Because they're always so high in the air or something. Anyway, they swooped down on those. They did what? That is too suspicious, I murmured. The girls were so strange, in fact, that I started to doubt they were noble women at all. I was given permission to be Lady Rosemine's retainer, the younger of the girls said. Do not tell me that nobody informed you. My apologies, Lady Clarissa, but your medal proves they are only an archnoble from Dunkelfelder, one of the knights replied. We've seen nothing to indicate that you are Lady Rosemine's retainer, and you cannot enter the city without a permit from the Ob. We shall send word to him now and see what he says. In the meantime, we must ask you to wait. The knight then turned to me and said, we need to go deliver a report and see about this permit. Guide these two to the waiting room for nobles, will you? After leaving us with the troublesome task of supervising the outsider nobles, the knight and a few others took off. We'd need to keep the girls busy until they returned, it seemed. The West Commander forced a smile and stepped in front of our unexpected guests. Follow me if you would. Do people still not know I am Lady Rosemine's retainer? Clarissa grumbled that once we'd arrived in the waiting room, her cheeks puffed out. Just what has Hartman been doing? How many times have I told him that I want to serve her as soon as possible? Her phrasing made me grimace. Not even a noble from a top-ranking duchy can enter Ehrenfest without the Archduke's permission. How can you claim to be Lady Rosemine's retainer when you don't even have that? Or don't even know that? Or Lord Hartman's fiancé, for that matter. The least you can do is start being honest with us. No, Gunter, stop, shouted the West Commander. It would have you take back those words and apologize, declared the older woman. She must have been a knight because a weapon suddenly appeared in her hand, and it was pointed right at me. The West Commander was floundering about, but I refused to back down. You two are already suspicious for not having a permit, and now you're pointing a weapon at a soldier? You must not even know how much Lady Rosamine treasures commoners. Do you know what she would say if you attacked us on the job, and then forced your way into the city? If you claim to be her retainer, then at least act in a way that won't damage her reputation. I wasn't just being dramatic. A bad retainer really could damage the reputation of their lord or lady. If these idiots couldn't even understand that, then I really didn't want them any getting near mine. The last thing she needed was retainers who looked down on commoners. Having people like that around would keep us from being able to speak at the monastery. Instead, she needed more retainers like Lord Daniel. Put that thing away, Griselda. But Lady Clarissa, I already know that Lady Rosamine treasures commoners. She has favored merchants and is respected by the people. The soldier is likely speaking the truth, though he is not the rudest commoner I have ever met. Lady Clarissa then shot me a triumphant grin and said, however, it is absolutely true that I am engaged to Hartman and have been permitted to serve Lady Rosamine. If you know so much about her, then you should also know that she likes her retainers to be treated with respect. You would do well to speak with more care. I suggest you still might not believe me, though. As a commoner soldier, you must be oblivious to the deals and promises made at the Royal Academy. Her taunting smile really ticked me off, partly because she was right. I was just a soldier and didn't know much about noble society. As much as I wanted to know more about the world my daughter now lived in, my opinions were painfully limited. Options were painfully limited. Still, there were some things I could learn at work. I still don't believe that you're engaged to Hartman. If you were, you would have come with your bridal luggage, and the groom's family would have welcomed you at the border gate with the permit you needed. In all my time as a guard, I've seen plenty of noble women marrying to Ehrenfest, but never have I seen one arrive without her partner or any family. How can we not deem you suspicious? I must have struck a nerve because Lady Clarissa's blue eyes shot wide open. Excuse me? She cried. How rude! Coming from someone trying to force her way in without a permit. As we growled and glared at each other, Lady Griselda shook her head in exasperation. Lady Clarissa, in this exchange at least, the soldier is entirely correct. What? You're taking his side, Griselda? I simply cannot agree with you. Neither one of us can deny that you came here out of the blue. All of a sudden, they were arguing with each other. I no longer felt hostile toward them. They were strange, but they didn't seem like bad people. I sighed. If you want us to trust you, then I'd suggest getting in contact with your fiancé, Lord Hartman. Nobles have those talking birds they can send off, right? If you really aren't getting married, he should reply. Just be warned, I know what his voice sounds like. You won't be able to trick me. Would a commoner here truly know his voice, I wonder? Of course, I said. We speak to him at the temple. Whenever we soldiers met with mine before leaving for spring prayer or the harvest festival, and whenever we returned with Grey Priest from Haas, Lord Hartman would always greet us, assuming he was there at the temple. Then he'd start asking us about mine, eager to learn everything he could. I had initially kept my guard up, wondering what he was after, but Lutz and Tully had since explained that he was her loyal vassal. And that made him seem like even more of a suspicious weirdo. Even her dad thinks he's a weirdo. With a flick of the wrist, Lady Clarissa produced one of those sticks that all nobles have, then created a white bird. I just arrived at Ehrenfest's west gate, she said to it, but the guards aren't letting me through. Nobles from other duchies require a permit from the Ob, apparently. What should I do? She then swung her stick, sending the white bird through the wall and out of sight. It wasn't long before a return with a response. "This is Rosemine." The bird had been addressed to Lord Hartman, but the message was clearly from mine. I could never mistake my daughter's voice. The way she addressed Lady Clarissa was at least proof that they knew each other. Lady Clarissa saw my surprise and gave me a smug look. "See, I am Lady Rosemine's retainer." Then the bird continued. "Clarissa, obey the soldiers and stay where you are. If you defy them, I will have you sent straight back to Dunkelfelder." Mine was very obviously furious. Lady Clarissa faltered, her arrogance turning into unease. She really hadn't expected to get scolded. "So you've got to stay here and obey our orders, huh?" I scoffed. "Good to know. Expect me to obey you? That is clearly crossing a line. You heard the bird, didn't you?" "I shall obey Lady Rosemine, but not any of you." As we glared at each other, Lord Damiel and Lady Angelica arrived. "Gunter, leave it at that," Lord Damiel said. "We've come here on Lady Rosemine's orders, since a noble from a top-ranking duchy is a bit much for commoners to deal with. We'll take care of the rest." The soldiers began to cheer. "That's Lady Rosemine for you. She knows what's up." "Lord Damiel, thank you so much." "Hey, go tell the citizens that everything's safe now." Whenever Lady Rosemine had business in the lower city, she sent Lord Damiel. He was a nice person and wasn't the least bit arrogant, unlike so many of the nobles. On top of that, he knew about mine's past. He really was the knight I could trust most. The other soldiers shared my opinion. Lord Damiel and Lady Angelica were always assigned to accompany us during religious ceremonies, so most of us were familiar with them. After conveying Lady Rosemine's message, Lord Damiel knelt before Lady Clarissa and the knight accompanying her. "I am a Damiel, a lay noble. May I pray for a blessing in appreciation of this serendipitous meeting ordained by the pure rivers flowing from betraying the goddess of water." "You may. O Lutrain, goddess of water, may you grant this meeting your blessing." A green light came out of the ring Lord Damiel was wearing. You were seeing how nobles greeted each other. High beasts were cool and perfect for knights, but kneeling and offering blessings was really cool too. I wonder whether I could somehow imitate their proposal face stones. You kind of already did, because from what we saw in F's side story, I think back in, don't remember which volume it was, he proposed to her with a magic stone he got from a creature he killed. So that's a face stone right there, so that could have been a proposal face stone. Why would you want it, though? You've already proposed to Effa, so why would you need it? As I considered that thought, Lord Damiel started telling Lady Clarissa what the plan was. Apparently she was going to have to wait a while before the permit could be sent over. Hartman and Lady Rosemine are in a meeting right now, and they're asked to wait here. Lady Rosemine will come as soon as the meeting is over and she has obtained the permit. "Oh, is that so?" Lady Clarissa replied with a smile. "Understood, then. I shall wait patiently until Lady Rosemine comes for me." She had been unrelenting in her attempts to get to the gate when we soldiers and the knights from the north had tried to stop her, but now she was being unusually obedient. Lord Damiel started to relax, but it was short-lived. Lady Clarissa continued to smile, but her blue eyes had the glint of a carnivore that had just found its prey. "In the meantime," she said, "can you please tell me what you can about Lady Rosemine and Ehrenfest? There must be things I should know before I start serving her here." Lord Damiel was clearly overcome with fear. Seeing him in such a state made me feel bad for him, but at the same time, "That's a good idea, Lady Clarissa. I want to hear too." I clenched my fist. There was a rare opportunity to hear about mine's life as a noble. She wasn't meeting with the merchants as so much these days, and it was even harder to speak openly with her now that she has those nobles accompanying her. In other words, I was starved of news. It didn't help that Les and Tully were coming here less often as a result of their apprenticeships. "This way, Lord Damiel. Do come with us, Lady Angelica." Lady Angelica shook her head. "I shall focus on guarding the door, Damiel. I entrust you with hosting Clarissa." She then placed her feet firmly in front of the waiting room door, placed a hand on the hilt of her sword, and started scanning the room. Her movements were so practiced that it was clear how faithfully she guarded mine each day. I'd hoped to get news from her too, but I would need to settle for what I could get from the others. "Gunter, are you?" Damiel asked. "I'll stay until the permit arrives," I replied. "We'll take care of security." Then I thumped my right fist against the left side of my chest a few times as a show of respect. Guess it'll be a good way to kill some time," Lord Damiel said with a half smile, then turned to face Lady Clarissa again. "However, as I would not know where to begin otherwise, could I ask you to at least give me some questions to answer? And my apologies, I will not be able to discuss Ehrenfest Industries in significant detail. I hope you can understand." Lady Clarissa nodded and said, "Naturally. Now first, tell me about Lady Rosemine's daily routine. I am already familiar with how her days flow in the Royal Academy, but how do things compare here in Ehrenfest? Are there any notable differences between her temple and castle schedules? How often does she visit the temple?" Her questions were flowing out like a river. "One at a time, please," Lord Damiel said weakly. "Her life in the castle isn't all that different from her life in the Royal Academy. Her retainers meet at second bell, which is when she goes out of bed." "Oh, that is rather late," Lady Griselda remarked, looking surprised. "How does she have time for her morning training?" "They don't do that here," Lady Clarissa replied with a knowing expression. "Those from Ehrenfest don't train in the morning." Not even in the Royal Academy. I didn't have any clue what they were on about morning training. Surely that wasn't something for a noblewoman who wasn't even a soldier or a knight to be doing. Wait. I remember hearing that mine would wander around the night training grounds to improve her stamina. Maybe all noble girls do that? I should note that second bell is when Lady Rosamine rises, not when she first opens her eyes, Lord Daniel clarified. She often wakes up much earlier so that she can read in bed. Felina has informed me that one of the scholar's primary duties is managing to tease books away from Lady Rosamine when comes time for her to get out of bed. Oh, Lady Clarissa brightly exclaimed. I will need to help them with that task then. From what I could gather, most noble women didn't spend every morning reading in bed, nor did their scholars need to perform morning duties. Lady Clarissa had a distinct sparkle in her eyes as she took in this flurry of new information about mine. Something told me that we might actually be able to get along after all. Then, once Lady Rosamine is ready for the day ahead, it's time for breakfast, Lord Daniel concluded. That is when male retainers are allowed to start entering our chambers. It was a blissful conversation. All in all, I got to spend some time finding out about my daughter's life in the world of nobles, that is, until another of those white birds arrived for Lord Daniel. Having been told that the permit had been issued and that mine was coming to the west gate, we left the noble's waiting room and went to the top of the tower, where she would have room to land her high beast. The soldiers and the west commander came with us. Not long after we had gotten into formation, mine landed well with Lord Hartman and none other than some of the nobles. She raised a hand to stop Clarissa from running over to her, then tapped her chest twice and looked at the saluting soldiers. She's growing up. I usually wouldn't get to speak with her or even see her up close outside of when we went to the monastery. Maybe it was because the day of our separation had made such a lasting impression on me. A part of me still pictured mine as being the same sweet, innocent girl from back then. That was why it always surprised me to see how grown up she was now. By this point, she carried herself completely like a noble, too. Feeling a pleasant warmth in my chest, I started mediating between mine and the West Commander. My daughter gave me a reassuring smile, then handed the permit and money to the commander. You soldiers have worked hard to protect Ehrenfest, and we would never punish you for that. In fact, I believe some praise is in order. Mine thanked the commander and the soldiers and swiftly left with Ladies Clarissa and Griselda. I wanted to spend some time with my daughter, but having her stay for too long would have caused problems for the other soldiers. It was tough. Commander, one of the soldiers called out. How much did you get from Lady Rosamine? Let's put it to good use once you and the other commanders have finished your swap at another. Don't go hogging it. Going all the way back to the central meeting room sounds like a pain, though. How about we head to the bar and arrange the swap there? From there, the soldiers continued chatting among themselves, more at ease now that the nobles were gone. The West Commander was going to treat everyone with the 2 large silvers that mine had given him. So yeah, I said, seems like nobles from other duchies are now gathering around Lady Rosamine. I see, Effa replied. She really must have her hands full. Still, Gunter, if you're not going to calm down, could you at least get changed and sit down? You came back early, but I assume you're still going to drink more, right? After heading to the bar and having my free drink courtesy of the West Commander, I'd come straight home. I did as my wife asked and got changed. We hadn't even gotten into the stuff that Lord Daniel had mentioned about mine's new life, so I expected our conversation to continue long into the night. Lady Rosamine grew a lot over the winter, I said. She's starting to look like a proper lady, if you ask me. Also, she's wearing this real stern expression today. When she came to the west gate to fetch Lady Clarissa, she was pulling a face like... We'll need to tell Tully about that later, or maybe she's already used to seeing it. Effa must have been enjoying this as much as I was, since she had also gone so long without any updates on mine. She happily listened to me ramble on while pouring some wine. Camilo, on the other hand, looked bored out of his mind. You, Mom, Tully, everyone in our family starts acting so weird whenever Lady Rosamine is mentioned, he said while eating his dinner. He didn't remember mine, so he didn't really like hearing about her. He had decided to become an apprentice at the planting company, though, so that lack of interest was sure to change. You'll understand soon enough, Camille, just you wait. Even after I start my apprentice work, I'm not going to turn into weirdos like you guys, Camille snapped, prickly as ever. I glanced at Effa. She glanced at me and we both laughed. Camille would never recognize mine and his older sister, but his apprenticeship at the planting company meant they were destined to meet. I raised my mug while imagining what the day might be like. Praise be to Vantol. I don't know what Vantol is. Let me know. Heartmate, you're crazy. Yeah, they would. They would just criticize you. Oh my god. What the fuck is that with that other one? Okay, yeah, I'll get to work on everything and I'll see you guys in the next one.